Okay. As a child, my memories of chocolate were fairly limited because the only thing that was available was this blue bar of chocolate. A lot of you would have remembered that from the 80s. I don't know if it still exists. I mean, it does in some form, but that particular bar of chocolate, I think they stopped making it because it's just a whole load of marketing rubbish. I was subjected to that because of my increased obsession with chocolate. I'd eat it and then I'd be transported into this really magical realm of not having to think about math class and get past homework of all sorts. But reality would strike, and then I went up to my mother one day and I asked her, I said, "Where's chocolate made from?" And she'd diligently point out, every time I asked this question, to those 2 glasses of milk, I said, "That's exactly where chocolate comes from." I was like, I knew that was rubbish, but I realized that there was no way of me wriggling out of it because thanks to Cadbury's literally pointing that out on their wrapper, I had no way to get around that. But as time went on, my curiosity for chocolate increased. It was more fascination than anything else. And when it came to my time in college, when I was in high school and I had to choose a degree, I went up to my parents and I said, "Do you think I can become a chef?" My mom looked at me and was like, Sure. She was being one of those typical South Indian moms who's looking after me, and she wanted to make sure that I had a good career path planned for me. And she said, "Okay, you know what? Why don't you become an engineer? Because you get a lot of dowry, and you don't have to work 14 hours a day." And so I was shipped off to engineering school. And she was like, "I don't have enough faith in your good looks to let you be a chef and go find a girl for yourself." So I was shipped off to engineering school. At that point, it seemed like a good idea because I could get a beautiful bride and get paid for it. It was a bit of a no-brainer at that point. But I tried sticking out in engineering school for as long as I could. 1 year later, 2 math papers failed, and I said, I can't do this anymore. So I dropped out of engineering school to pursue my obsession with chocolate, only to find out that chocolate is made from this ugly brown bean. What an anticlimax. And where did this bean come from? It came from an even more boring-looking pod and an unflattering-looking tree. That was literally, it was my bubble that just burst. I was like, coffee comes from a bean. All you do is boil it, and you get black liquid. I was like, obviously, there's more to that than just boiling beans and processing it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how chocolate is made really quickly so that you don't have to bullshit your kids when they ask you where chocolate comes from, and you can act really smart in a dinner party where people are talking about wines and terroirs. You can talk to them about chocolate. So chocolate starts off in that pod that I showed you. These beans are harvested, dried, and they're fermented. After they're fermented, they're shipped to different parts of the world where chocolate manufacturers usually put them through a few steps, which are almost uniform. This starts off by roasting beans, and you'll notice that they start becoming darker. Right after they're roasted, they're cracked. And if you notice, once the beans are cracked from the images, you'll see that there's a thin, papery skin that starts separating. This separation is then carried out as a purification process. It's winnowed, where there's a lot of air blown into these beans, and the skin comes off. And this pure bean is then ground with sugar, vanilla, and a bunch of other interesting ingredients. This is the formation of the chocolate as we know it. And this is, if you were to be eating milk chocolate, this is where they'd add milk powder to it as well. And then it's further refined. It's an unappealing looking process, but this is what actually develops all the complex notes that we understand about chocolate, the flavors and the texture. That is purely developed from this process, and it's called conching. Right after conching, you can't literally cast conch chocolate into bars. So you have to take it through a process called tempering. And different chocolates have different temperatures. Tempering is a fairly simple process. You heat up the chocolate to a particular temperature, and then you rapidly cool it down, and then you bring it up to another temperature where it's stable enough to be molded. And then you mold chocolate into what you see around you. And that is pretty much how chocolate is made. And then the question of what is good chocolate usually comes up. Or is there something as bad chocolate? I mean, you ask me, I'd say there is no such thing as bad chocolate, but as you can see, I've been doing a fair amount of experimentation. And so, I mean, good chocolate for me has always been a question of subjectivity. It's like food. Like my mom would never eat anything that I cooked, even though I have 10 restaurants. People are like, my mom is like, I can't relate to anything that you're doing. So I don't know how you managed to make a career out of this. But I went on to be okay with it. And, but I just realized that, like food and chocolate, there's a huge amount of subjectivity. If I were to go past that and look at chocolate objectively, there are about 4 characteristics that most people will ask you to look for when you eat good chocolate. One is that the chocolate has to snap clear, and it has to have a smooth, shiny surface. And when you put it in your mouth, it has to melt evenly, and it has to have a nice, long, smooth finish. It's like whiskey, I guess, in some sense. But yeah, but you don't get drunk on it. So I don't know why people get addicted to chocolate. But anyway, so I can keep talking about chocolate, but it's only going to get that far if you don't taste it. So there are envelopes under your seat. So you can pick it up, and then there are three little packets in that. All of them have some sort of labeling. It's A, B, and C. And just let's start with C first. And, okay, so I promise you it's not roofies. I was stopped at the immigration. I'm not even making this up. I was stopped at immigration telling me that, this drugs, and I had a 14-hour delay because of that. So the white piece of chocolate that you see in bag C, just take one of it, put it in your mouth, and just bite down, but don't chew on it. Let it melt. That is white chocolate. I don't even know why they call it chocolate, because there's no cocoa beans in it. It's just cocoa butter and milk solids and sugar. It's like eating solidified condensed milk of some sort with cocoa butter in it. And now, once you've savored that, switch to the other sample. There's another brown sample in that same bag C. This is milk chocolate. So this is essentially the first stage to experiencing chocolate as kids. For me, it was Cadbury's dairy milk. I'm sure all of you would have gone through that stage at some point of time in your lives. And if you start chewing down on it, you'll notice that you've gone past the sweetness and the milky notes, and now you're able to identify hints of cocoa. And there's also a mild caramelization taste that you'll start realizing towards the end of that chew. And it's interesting. If you would have tried this right up, and you can save some of it for later and then go back and try it, if you were to eat the milk chocolate straight up, you'll miss a lot of these amines. This is a process by which your brain remembers to forget and forgets to remember. It's called a prevention of sensory overload. It's what a lot of chefs are trying to do when they're trying to give you multiple courses and give you palate cleansers in between, so your mind's always refreshed. So everything that you eat at any stage is new. Let's move on to sample A. Sample A is dark chocolate. It's 54%. This particular chocolate comes from Ghana. And if you were to try it, you'll notice that immediately it's got a whole new range of flavors that you wouldn't identify if you would have tried it just by itself. And you'll notice that apart from it being bitter, it also has a very inherent fruity note. And then it also starts developing more characteristics as you let it melt. And now, I think there's bottles of lemon juice around some of your seats. If you can pick it up, don't drink it. Just take the cap off, and yeah, it's an atomizer. So just spray it above you, not into people's faces, but just above you, but enough for it to go around the areas around you. Now, just imagine that you're sitting right now in a grove of just lemon trees, and that there's a lot of lemonade being spilled everywhere. And now, while you're inhaling this and you're registering the flavors of lemon, try and eat the third piece of chocolate, which is in sample C. Sorry, in sample B. You'll immediately notice now that you've got the pictures of lemon trees, lemonade, lime juice in your head. Now you'll start identifying a lot of acidic flavors. Like it almost feels like you're identifying red currants in this chocolate. It's got a nice fruity, almost red berry-like finish to it, which is characteristic of this particular bean of chocolate. So essentially, this is what happens when you look at a wrapper in which chocolates come. Most of it is just marketing rubbish. Sample A and B are the same thing. A lot of times people just write a lot of gibberish on top just so that they can distinguish one chocolate from the other, and they've literally just added an amine to confuse your nose. So like taste is a function of your mouth, flavor is actually a function of both your nose and mouth. And that's what distinguishes one from another when you're eating a meal, and that's how you identify and register meals as well. So when it comes to identifying good chocolate, and it's a question that I keep getting asked all the time, and saying, so what is good chocolate? I mean, the only way to really identify good chocolate is to eat a lot of it, and you know, form your own opinions. And it's extremely subjective. Like I've been asked if I would ever eat milk chocolate, and it's like that's the only thing I eat, even though I'm a chocolatier or whatever. But I love eating milk chocolate, and that's my personal opinion about chocolate. But that for me forms my nostalgia, and that's how I build my opinions about good or bad chocolate. And the other thing that is very crucial to identifying good chocolate is to let it melt slowly. It's just that way you can get to identify a lot of things that you wouldn't have if you were to start chewing down on it. And 3, and I think this is the most important aspect about enjoying a bar of chocolate, is that you don't ever share it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
So Sandesh, you don't just bribe audiences with chocolate. You have a pretty serious restaurant business.
Yes, I do. I've got 10 restaurants in different spheres of interest.
Not just selling chocolate.
We mostly sell chocolate. I mean, that's a flagship brand. But we've got pizzerias, and we're doing some interesting food in the Indian new age Indian food in some sense.
You also have a startup trying to connect people locally together.
Yes, that's actually something that I've always been passionate about, because the food industry has been muddled with opinions. If somebody writes something in the Sunday Times, and that's the opinion that you go to that restaurant with, it's not necessarily that you can make that connection. And unfortunately, that's how a lot of good food that are culturally evolved gets lost. And we're trying to connect home cooks who've been doing this for generations, and trying to get that out to an audience right now, and getting people to form their own opinions about cultural food. And we're trying to get them first-time entrepreneurs, getting into the restaurant business, the food service business, a lot easier than going out and starting a food truck or a restaurant.
It's called Kitchen.
It's called Kitchen, yes, and it's based out in New York for now. Hopefully,
so last question. You brought over from India how many hundred sachets of chocolate?
It's a math question. It's 1,350 sachets of chocolate.
And
you know why I got stopped for it.
You weren't joking, so we were worried that we weren't going to get Sandesh here in time. You were stopped. And what did the customs officials say to you?
They literally looked at the white, and that was unfortunately the first thing that they looked at, and they said, "You're actually carrying roofies." I said, "You wouldn't know roofies if it hit you in the face." I mean, how could that look like roofies, right? And yeah, and thanks to my mouth, I got stopped, and my wife was looking at me and was like, "Why would you even go and say things like that?" But thankfully...
So you got pulled off the plane? Or?
No, so we weren't even allowed to board. This happened right at customs. And thankfully, that plane that I was supposed to get here on developed a technical snag. Its landing gear broke. So we had a 14-hour delay. So during that point in time, I called somebody in the restaurant to bring more chocolate.
Because they captured your other chocolate?
Yes, they completely put it away. And so we got fresh packets of chocolate that were completely sealed and individual bags. And I sat in the lounge with my wife and sat and put chocolates into these bags. And that's how we've got them here now.
See? The lengths our speakers go to keep you amused. Sandesh Reddy.
Thank you very much.